So today is Saturday, August the 10th. Um, just finished my very first finals season. So semester one finals have come to a close. Um, if you look at your calendar, you'll see that today is Saturday. Yes, we did have our last final on a Saturday. We were meant to have it on Monday, but tropical storm or Hurricane Debbie kind of pushed things back a little bit, unfortunately. So we had to take it today, but it's okay. Everything was kind of like all is well that ends well, right? Like, I'm done with it. I don't have to worry about it for now. So I'm just happy that it is over. So this final schedule was pretty dense, but that's kind of to be expected. Um, it's just kind of the way things go, for better or for worse. So I'm just crossing off my calendar now. I keep pretty meticulous details. I could post something about that or make a video going over how I keep a calendar if that's something that interests you all. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. Passed all of my classes, so I could not be happier about that. Our class as a whole, and I mean the NSU class that I am in, we all did exceptionally well on EKG, so really happy about that. EKG is meant to be slash is slash whatever one of the harder courses this semester, purely because it's like learning a new language, right? So if you go into a Spanish class and you don't know any Spanish, you're going to have to learn from the ground up. That's exactly what EKG is like. The majority of us have some medical background, some medical experience. We all have shadowing experience, but I'd say over half of us have time administering or being a part of healthcare, so we're all familiar with like what an EKG is. But also to that end, I mean, we know the basics. So we went from knowing like, oh, this squiggle does this and this squiggle does this, to here's the series of the squiggles. What is wrong with this person and how do you fix it? So it's kind of cool to see that progression and looking back at the notes from the beginning of the semester and seeing all of that and realizing just how easy it was in the beginning and how hard it is now. But that's the interesting part, is you have to keep this perspective of it looks easy now, but at the time it was hard. So just don't get an ego about that. So my strategy for this finals week was I would pace it out, right? So if I knew I had finals coming up, what I would do is, all right, so we took anatomy on Friday, so yesterday. All right, let's say I had 10 slide sets for anatomy. That's on Friday the 9th. So I would walk the days backwards. So I'd be like, okay, today's the 9th. I've got, the exam's on the 9th. I've got 10 slides. Let me back it up. Okay, I'll start studying on the 30th, do one slide set per day. That way I was breaking it down for each class, and I knew that by the time I hit the exam time, I'd studied all the material. And I would usually leave a 1 or 2 day buffer so I could have time to review. For the harder classes, I was trying to leave a 2 day buffer. For the easier classes, I just left like 1. Now, mind you, when I say easy is very relative. There is not a single class this semester that I did not study for. I studied for every single class. And that's just kind of how it is. So for perspective, today's... So, hang on. Let me think about what I want to say. This semester was 18 credit hours. And it was a 10-week semester because it's the summer semester, so it was pretty packed in there. Now, I studied for every single class, but the priority of Class A over Class B mattered a lot. There were, we'll call it 2 classes, that I didn't study as hard for. I would skim over it, make sure I understood the foundations and understand the central message, and for me, that was good enough of studying. And then there were other classes that I would sit down with a set of 30 slides, and I would break that down for 2 hours just for that 30 slide section. So you have to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. I personally know that 5 students in our class have had to adopt different ways of studying. They figured out that, okay, what I did for exam 1 did not work this time, so I need to change what I'm doing. I know some people went from using a laptop to an iPad. I know some people went in the opposite direction. They went from iPad to laptop. One of my friends, he went from being pen and paper to switching up and getting an iPad. I'll have to check with him to see how he did with that. So my strategy was really class dependent, course dependent, right? So for the majority of classes, I'll just say for a harder class, what I would do is I would pull up the slide set and I would just sit with the slides. So let me pull up something here. So I've got up physiology, right? So that's the exam we had this morning. So I would go through, and this is for physiology specifically what I would do. This does not apply to every single class. I would go through, look at a slide, right? So I'm on slide, which slide am I on? I'm on slide 7. I'm not going to show you because I don't know if I can or not. Right, I'm on slide 7. All right, there's about 10 sentences on this slide, right? It's one of 39 for this slide set. About 10 sentences. I'd read through it, pick out the bold words, I'd key in on what he said in class, and then I would go through and make sure I understood what the slide was saying. So if this slide was talking about how the cerebellum communicates with the cerebrum, I wouldn't try to memorize every single line because I'd overwhelm myself. I would figure out how to summarize that one slide into 2 or 3 sentences. And for me, that was good enough. You might vary. I know my classmates did. That's just what I did for this one class. So you have to know what works for you and what doesn't. If you were able to breeze by an undergrad and everything just came easy to you, oh, I'm a natural, right? One of 2 things is going to happen. You're going to be part of the 10% who can carry that over into grad school, or you're going to be a part of the 90% who needs to learn how to study. And you need to learn how to study because the rubber hits the road very quick. It's not something I'd recommend putting off. If you go to your first exam and you feel like, okay, I studied well, and then you walk out of there and you say, okay, I am going to fail this class, that's not good. So try to set the foundation early. And if you make mistakes, all right, once again, I personally know somebody who got a D on their very first exam in this program. They passed the class. They did fine. It's about learning to adapt. Not everything is going to go your way. Not everything went my way. So you need to learn to adapt. Here are your circumstances. Now you have to figure out how to make them work. You can't change what's in this little box right here. You have to learn how to make it work. And that's the main challenge of this semester, I would say, is being able to adapt to what's being thrown at you. I'd say that's the one thing that separated the people at the top of the class from the people at the bottom of the class. Now, if you know how you study going into the program, it very well might work. I've only had to adapt a little bit, but I'm mainly adapting to my professors. I set a very good study style foundation in undergrad, and I've been able to keep it. I'm very happy about that. But definitely the volume has changed. So, don't get stuck in your ways. You'll figure out how to make it work, and if you can't, ask for help. If you get stuck, alright, so here's my strategy, right? This is what I would say to you. I'm going to pause it real quick so I can drink some water because my throat's drying up, so just give me a second. Okay, I would say to do this for your first exam specifically, so for your first exam in every single class, all right? Even if it's same class, taught a little bit differently, or if it's, 2 different classes taught by the same professor, I would do this for your first exam in every single class. The night before the exam, once all of your studying is done, write down your predicted score. Now, because you've had such a academic upbringing or whatever, you've had tests recently, you might have a good idea of about what grade you can expect. So, the night before, write down your prediction. All right? So I'll just play along with it. I've got my little pen and paper here. Let me just write it down on a random sheet of paper. 85, right? I'm thinking, all right, I studied pretty good. I'm going to get an 85 on this. Perfect. Now, go in, take the exam. We'll say the exam's at 8 o'clock. Before you finish your exam, right before you click submit, make a mental note to yourself, having taken the exam, what do you think you made? Okay? Alright, so I'm in those shoes. We'll say the exam took me an hour. It's 9 o'clock. I'm about to click submit. Alright, so let's see. I know I missed question 4. I didn't really like question 8 either. Question 20 was really hard. Okay, so maybe I'm gonna get maybe I'm gonna get an 87, right? So you make a mental note of 87. I'm just writing it down for argument's sake, right? And then you get to check yourself, right? The exam grade is either going to come back instantly or it's going to take a couple days. So if you click submit and it instantly shows 70, okay. Mentally, you thought you were going to get an 85 and then an 87, and it rocks back with a 70. So that is about a 16-point difference between what you expected and what you got. You need to go and talk to the professor and get it figured out. All right? So now let's say you wrote down 85 in the beginning, 87 during the exam, and it comes back. All right, you got a 92. Perfect, right? You're close enough to your predicted where you just won a couple extra coin flips than you thought you were going to. Great. The main times that you should be worried is when going into it and having finished the exam, you expected to do a lot better than you did. Those are the causes for concern because you have that disconnect between what you know, between what you think you know and what you actually know. And those disconnects will catch up with you. A lot of these courses are cumulative. Let me think. That class was cumulative. That one was cumulative. That one was cumulative. That one was cumulative. Yeah, there you go. So you need to make sure that you know what you think you know. And this is the easiest, quickest way to do it. And you get instant feedback. And you can't lie to yourself, right? You serve no one if you lie to yourself. Who does it help? Nobody. It doesn't even help you to lie to yourself because you're making your life more miserable in the future. So just be honest. If you walk out of that exam and you say, I just bombed it. I got a 60. I'm not cut out for this. I'm going to fail. Write down or take a mental note of the 60 and recognize you can dig out of that hole. It is okay. It means you have to change and adapt. Every single professor in this program desperately wants you to succeed. And they are more than happy and more than willing to help you. You just need to take the first step, admit you have the problem, and reach out to them. All right? Don't get overwhelmed by it. It's not a fun place to be in. So make sure that you know what you think you know. Right? Because here's the thing. If you predict, I'm going to get a 70 on the exam, and you do get a 70, you know what you don't know. So you're arguably in a better position because you recognize I didn't study as much as I needed to going into this, and the results do show that. So once again, write down your predicted score when you're done studying, right before you click submit, and then compare it to your actual score. That way you get a good feel for your health in that course. You can see where you stand. A lot of these, so if you're familiar with Canvas, then you're already going to be familiar with how the courses are structured and how you can find modules and things like that. So a lot of people who used Canvas in undergrad, they'd have it so you could see the class average and how everybody stacked up. That's definitely in the minority in this program. It's less likely to show you how you stack up. There will be professors who say, all right, the class average was an 88, and they'll tell you. But it's not a guarantee, and I wouldn't bank on it. Another thing I would say is, for a hard class, don't bank on a curve. So, I'll just go back to EKG because I already called that one out today. Right, our class average was the highest class average that this professor has had. So if you were banking on a curve, you're already behind because everyone else has a really high average. You're not going to get that curve if you're just banking on it. The only time that you will feasibly get a curve is when everybody studies and everybody fails. And even then, they're not going to fix it right away. So you just need to keep studying, is what I'm trying to tell you. Don't count on a curve, because if you are counting on it, you're not going to get it. Because here's what happens, right? Everyone knows the moment you start looking for something, you never find it, right? Like, let's say you're walking around in Publix, you're like, where's the canned tomato soup? You're never going to find it. But when you're there next week, you don't need the canned tomato soup anymore, guess what aisle you're going to walk down? You're going to find that tomato soup. Same thing for exams. Is the one time you do really good, professor's going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to change some questions. Well, dang it, I didn't need it on this one, I need it on the other exam. But you can't control it, so don't bank on a curve. And reach out for help when you need it, which would be immediately. There's no harm in it. Do not be embarrassed to reach out to a professor and ask for help, clarification, say, hey, I did worse than I predicted. Can we talk some things out? And they will respect you more for it, and they will be so much happier to help you now than have you email them 8 weeks in being like, hey, I need some help. Yeah, it's too late. Do it right away. Okay? And even then, you could be extra proactive and say, during the slides, like, oh, I really don't understand this. I need to schedule office hours. Great. The earlier you catch it, the better. But I will once again rehash this point. Your exam grade does not define you. If you walk in and you get a 65 on your first exam, it's okay. That is okay. You're not in a fantastic spot, but you can and will be able to dig yourself out. So don't get too caught up in the, I did bad on this one, I'm screwed. You got this.